And so until Bitcoin came along, which isn't that long ago, the information age has been about spreading like money as fiat, not as good money. And only a small corner of the internet and pre-internet, a few gold bugs were the ones that understood what good money was, and that's it. And so yeah, with Bitcoin, yeah, it's definitely opened that door again for people to study what money is, but it's still a tiny amount of people. It's still super niche. It's still, yeah, it's still very, very small. More, obviously almost everyone in the world has heard about Bitcoin, but the people who actually understand it is like, God knows of that, 0.1. You'll get shiny object syndrome of like, oh, but Solana's going up more, or like, oh, maybe I should get some of this Pepe or whatever the hell else, happens in bull markets where, you read about people making X on some shitcoin. But those things ultimately end up going to zero eventually. So the nice thing about Bitcoin is you just have to learn the thing about the thing once. If you want to buy and hold Bitcoin for the long term, I think conviction is the number one thing. And so it should continue to go up against fiat forever, right? Especially when
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It's the easiest way to show your support and help the podcast grow, bringing great content to even more listeners like you. Plus, subscribing means you'll never miss an episode. And a big shout out to StampSeed for supporting the show. Their indestructible solution is perfect for protecting your Bitcoin seed phrase. Now, let's get to the reason you're here. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to Your Bitcoin Story, the podcast where we uncover the incredible journeys of Bitcoiners around the globe. I'm your host, Gigi, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by none other than Daniel Sempere Pico, aka BTC Gandalf. From closing deals in real estate to diving into Bitcoin mining at Brains, and now helping entrepreneurs build their dream monopoly businesses through personal branding. Daniel's story is nothing short of epic. He's all about Bitcoin, business, family, and freedom. And he's here to share how he exited the office grind to thrive in the online world. Get ready for some wisdom, laughs, and actionable tips. Let's dive into Daniel's Bitcoin story. Daniel, welcome to the show.
What an intro. Thank you very much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Yeah, I was very excited to get this going. As of recently, we've been spending a lot of time chatting because maybe we'll get into it midway through the episode. But yeah, I'm really thankful for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on the show and share your Bitcoin story. So let's start with, where does your Bitcoin origin story start? How did you first discover Bitcoin?
So the first time that I can remember, being aware of Bitcoin was in, or at least looking into it, was in 2017, around March 2017. So I was a real estate broker, residential real estate broker in Hong Kong at the time. And I was viewing apartments with a client who had, I think he was he was an American guy. I think he was an ex-college football player, good looking dude, fit, had a great budget. So I knew like he was pretty rich. And he was like telling, you spend maybe like 3-4 hours seeing 10 apartments. So you're chatting with clients about all sorts of stuff. And he was telling me about Bitcoin and Ethereum. So he was saying, oh, you should look at Bitcoin and blah, 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 blah. So I was like, okay, this guy's pretty smart. Like, he's successful. If he's talking about Bitcoin, I should look into it. So I can't remember exactly what I did, but I imagine that I must have just like Googled Bitcoin and then like read whatever the first thing that popped up was, which was probably a BBC article about Bitcoin. And after doing my research, I concluded that it was a Ponzi scheme, that it was a bubble, that it had no intrinsic value. I understood the open source code aspect of it because I had like already started to I had my own real estate brokerage and I was like trying to build my own website. And I was trying to decide whether to like use WordPress or code my own or hire an agency or whatever. Anyway, so I kind of understood the open source code thing because I dove down the coding rabbit hole, and I was like, anyone can just take Bitcoin, copy it, and make their own Bitcoin. Like, how can that be that? Yeah, I didn't get it obviously, but yeah. So I was basically like, I'll watch it now that I understand it. I'll watch what happens and see if my thesis plays out. I think I had Twitter then. I think I went on Twitter and I followed a bunch of people in the crypto Twitter space. I remember following Kobe, which we'll get back to later in the story, Crypto Cobain. But anyway, 2018 happens, Bitcoin crashes back down to 3K. I'm like, see, I'm a genius. I was right. It was a bubble. And then I just got on with my life. I was doing real estate. I ended up in 2019, I started the process of acquiring a real estate property management company in Hong Kong. But basically in 2019, Bitcoin went back up to like 10K. And that's when I was like, okay, I said it was a bubble, but bubbles don't reinflate back to halfway up their crazy bubble peak. So there must be, for me, that was a signal that it's like, there's something here that I'm not understanding, right? So let me look more deeply into it. So I decided to buy some Bitcoin just as a way to get skin in the game. And I thought, if I own Bitcoin, I'll be more motivated to actually learn about it. So I bought some Bitcoin. I think it was on Binance. It was like, I think I used my credit card to buy it. Like I didn't even know how to send money to an exchange or any of that stuff. And I literally just left it there. I didn't realize that Binance, so I probably bought it around June 2019. And I didn't realize that Binance had a hack in like May 2019 where a bunch of Bitcoin got stolen, I think. Anyway, I left my Bitcoin there. I didn't really think about it again. Bought this business, spent a year turning it around. It started doing well and spitting out cash. So I was like trying to figure out where to invest the cash. And I was like buying, it was like the beginning of COVID. So I was like buying stocks and everything was just going to the moon. And I remember, whilst I was like buying the COVID crash dip, I remember that reading, oh, Bitcoin's gone back down to like 3K one day. But I was just like, I have my Bitcoin. When I look, when I learn about it, maybe I'll buy some more. But right now, I'm not selling it. I'm not like gonna paper hand it. I don't care about it. I'm just gonna leave it there. So I just left it there. I didn't look at Bitcoin. And then once I was like kind of running out of ideas of what stocks to buy to put my money into, I started looking at Bitcoin again. And it just so happened that it was during like after a year of working on the business and focusing on turning that around. My wife and I were moving from Hong Kong to the UK. So at the end of 2020, I went on a trip to Scotland where we had bought a place to get the keys. We were completing on the property. So I went to get the keys. This was during COVID. There was a quarantine in Hong Kong. So when you flew into Hong Kong, you had to spend 14 days in a hotel without being allowed to leave, right? So I went to Scotland. I was there for 10 days. It was like the first time that I hadn't been in Hong Kong and working, had a sort of a break. So I started listening to podcasts, and I remember this. I just remembered I listened to some podcasts that mentioned Bitcoin again, and I was like, oh, I've got this. I'm in Scotland. I'm working remotely, different time zone. I've got like the morning free or the evenings are free because of the time zone with Hong Kong. So I'm just listening to more podcasts about Bitcoin, and then I fly back to Scotland. Fly back to Hong Kong. I'm in quarantine in this Hong Kong hotel for 14 days. Again, working, but just lots of time in the morning and evening. And I stumbled on it was a couple of Michael Saylor interviews so this is like now beginning of December 2020. And there's one interview where he equates Bitcoin to he does the analogy where it's like Facebook is a social network and Bitcoin's a monetary network. And that's actually the thing that clicked for me because I'd been looking at stocks and probably looked at Facebook and like studied network effects as part of like figuring out what companies are good to buy. That analogy for some reason struck a chord with me, as well as like I started learning about the scarcity, the fact that no one can change it, etc., etc. But yeah, mixture of all those factors, I was like, okay, that made me very bullish on it. And I was like, this is better than any of the stocks I've invested in. And I just started selling everything that I owned and buying Bitcoin. And that's when I was like peak mania, just trying to get everyone I knew to buy Bitcoin, blah, 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 like, 20K. Fun story. So my mom was, she'll listen to me, right? So she trusts me. So if I say like, this is a good idea, she'll probably do it. So I told her you should buy some Bitcoin, and she signed up to an exchange. And sometime towards the back half of December 2020, when the price is really running, and it took them like 3 weeks to process her KYC. And in that time, Bitcoin went from DK to like K or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, I first heard about it in 2017, first bought it in 2019, and sort of first properly understood it at the end of 2020.
Amazing. Yeah. And it's interesting how the COVID kind of pandemic euphoria got you it forced you down the rabbit hole because you had so much free time. You're like, let me look at other stuff. And then the more you start reading about it, the more it makes sense. And the deeper you go. And as you said, you start selling off other assets, may that be stocks or your dining chairs or whatever it is. Just start stacking sats. But then what was the transition like for you to brains? I mean, I personally know this story, but I would love for you to share it with the audiences, because I think it's a fantastic way of, especially now when there's so much opportunity and so many companies are looking to hire and expand, and people are like, oh, what can I do in the Bitcoin space? And maybe I don't have the skills, and people usually think, oh, I need to be a programmer to be working in Bitcoin. Can you share a little bit more about how you joined the Brains team? How did that happen?
Yeah, so towards the end of 2020, I was in real estate business in Hong Kong, but I was, we owned, I had a business partner. So me and my business partner owned this company. It had been operating for 15 or so years before we bought it. And we kind of went in there, turned it around, put some new staff in. And after the turnaround, it didn't really require as much, us to be involved as much in the day-to-day operations. But at some point towards the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, my business partner and I just disagreed on the future direction of the business. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't really involved I still own the company, but I wasn't really involved in it from January 2021 onwards, right? Mm-hmm. So I had nothing to do. I was leaving Hong Kong 6 months later. So it's not like I could start doing something new or whatever. I just kind of had this period. I was like, I've lived in Hong Kong for 25 years. I've got this period of time where I'm just going to enjoy myself, hang out with my friends. And I was like becoming obsessed with Bitcoin. So I made in February 2020. So I'd started tweeting about Bitcoin already under my real name, but that account was sort of in the like real estate Twitter space.
Okay.
So I was like, I don't want to just suddenly start tweeting about Bitcoin. And I could see things maybe were going south with my business partner. So I was like, if there's like lawsuits involved and stuff, I don't necessarily want him to think that I'm super rich because I'm into Bitcoin or whatever it is. So just the less info your enemy has about you, the better it is if things are going to get messy. So I was like, okay, I need to, I still want to tweet about Bitcoin, and also Twitter is a great place to learn about Bitcoin. So let me make a separate account. And I remember thinking like, oh, a lot of people that I already follow are anonymous or pseudonymous. Satoshi was pseudonymous. And I just remember when I was like trying to set up the account, it's like trying to figure out what the name was. And I did Bitcoin Gandalf. Just basically, I modeled it after Crypto Cobain. But that was just like one of the names that stuck out to me from back then. I just thought it was hilarious that anyway. So I made this account and I just started, I was listening to podcasts, reading, basically, doing that thing where you become obsessed with Bitcoin. We've all been there, and tweeting about it. And then, I think I did a post. I quoted Robert Breedlove in a tweet, and it got 200 likes. And I was like, whoa! Like, there was one other time during the 2020 election where I tweeted something, and I had Vitalik and Andreas Antonopoulos in the replies having a discussion. It was something about to do like, this is how naive I was. I tweeted about something like, why can't we use blockchains to make election result, like voting and election result collections more efficient or something? And Andreas Antonopoulos was like saying, no, that's stupid. And Vitalik was saying, no, that's smart. That's definitely what should happen.
Wow.
So I was like, still at the end of 2020, I got that Bitcoin was like the category leader, but there was still a category called crypto, and there's maybe some other stuff that it could be used for. Anyway, sorry. So I started tweeting about Bitcoin, and then I was like, okay, there's something here with this. Like when that Robert Breedlove post went viral, it was like 200, but for me, it was big. I was like, oh, there's something here. Maybe I could like keep talking about Bitcoin, because by then I already knew the reason why I bought the real estate company was because I wanted to have the time to do something else. I knew if I owned a company that was operated by employees, eventually I could have time to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't want to just like quit real estate and let all that knowledge sort of go down the drain and start again from zero. That is ultimately what happened anyway, because I ended up exiting that company and kind of starting again from zero. But my idea was I want to do something on the internet. It's either going to be like learn to code or use media. I'd read Naval Ravikant's like How to Get Rich Without Getting Lucky. And I have, maybe they're not here. I've got a few of his tweets like laser etched on wood are and one of them is like, learn to code, or if you can't code, do podcasts, blogs, and whatever, videos, right? And so I was like, okay, internet business, it's either going to have to be like I learn to code or I do some sort of media on the internet content. So Twitter was going well, and I was just like, okay, there's something here. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep tweeting. And then one day I was in bed scrolling on my iPad on Twitter, and I see a tweet from somebody who works at Brains saying, we're looking for a social media intern. So I got out of bed, applied, and in between the time when my account had maybe grown to like 2,000, 3,000 followers, maybe in like a few months. So it was doing well. But in the time between my application and actually getting an interview with them, I saw that Stacy Herbert, Max and Stacy, she had tweeted, it was like the China mining ban was happening. It was like May 21, maybe. She had tweeted like, we want to get someone in the mining space on Orange Pill podcast. Who should we have? And because I'd applied for a job at Brains, I replied saying, I have the founders of Brains on. And they actually they've had the founders of Brains on because of that. And so in my interview, I was like, obviously they were impressed that I think they already maybe followed me on Twitter or had seen my Twitter or whatever, but they were also impressed by like I'd grown the account so much. And so I got the job at Brains like that. Yeah. No experience. Obviously I'd done marketing for my businesses, but I didn't have like marketing specific experience. I'd never really studied writing or whatever. I was just literally, writing about what I learned. I would hear things on podcasts and I would have ideas or thoughts or opinions about them, and I would just tweet about them. That was it.
It's incredible how like one comment was that like influenced you getting that job, where most people would never think about like the impact that one, comment on an X can have such an impact with that. So it just shows to kind of be proactive whenever you're applying for jobs. It's not just apply and wait and pray and hope you get the job, but like keep an eye out, see if you can put some input there, because you never know how it may turn out. Like in your case, Daniel, with getting the founders of Brains on Stacy's and Max's pod was kind of your own cheat code, which turned out and landed you the job.
Yeah, I mean, it's luck that they saw that tweet and then happened to pick them to have them on the pod. But the sort of mind frame that I was in was like, how can I provide as much value to Brains already to show that like they should pick me for the job? And so it was serendipity. I saw the tweet. I thought about that. I did that. I did the same, like the way I first sort of developed a relationship with my business partner was he was a real estate investor. And I saw that the pictures he would advertise his properties with weren't very good. And so I just offered I went to see one of his apartments and I just offered to take photos of it for him for free and just said, I'll just take some photos and send them to you. And I did that, like took better professional. I learned how to like use a camera. I was like really good with it. So I did my own photos and I sent him photos like, I went to his apartment and sent him photos like 24 hours later. And he was like, wow, I used to pay a professional photographer like however much money. And he would take like a week to turn the photos around. And you just did it, just as well for free. And that's how we started like becoming friends. And then eventually ended up buying this business together. Even though it didn't work out, it was still just seeing how you can be useful.
Of course. So how was that transition of you kind of switching? To be honest, it feels like two different worlds, right? Like dealing with real estate listings and like high net worth clients to like going full-time working in Bitcoin and this kind of fresh new industry where it's like a bunch of very varied range of characters and not very structured and just kind of, in a sense, wild west. How was that for you, that experience?
Yeah, it was all right. I mean, Bitcoin, I'd never really like looked at, I'd never really like gotten into American subcultures. So like Bitcoin was an introduction to all the like subcultures that come underneath it, like, the libertarians and the cypherpunks and the people who are carnivores and just all these things, right? And like before I was probably someone who was like, no, it's not probably, I was like, oh, Americans are so stupid. They have guns and everyone just dies in school shootings and all, all the stereotypical sort of stuff. So my mind's changed on a lot of that stuff. But that was wild. So I was like getting an education in like American culture. I was getting an education in like the cypherpunk ethos and like, sort of privacy and the internet and Bitcoin. And I was moving from Hong Kong, where I'd lived for 25 years, to Scotland. My wife was pregnant. She was like 6 months pregnant. We had our daughter 2 months after 2 or 3 months after we arrived in Scotland. So I was like having a baby, moving countries, changing careers, lawsuit with my business partner. It was crazy. It was a crazy time.
Talk about radical change.
Yeah,
all at
and
once.
I mean, I've moved 3 times in the last 3 years, and you could argue I've sort of changed. When I left Brains to start the consulting business, that was a change as well, and it was done at the same time as a move. So I'm done doing.
But no
that.
baby. I mean, no new baby.
I had
there was a new baby.
There was a new baby in 2022 as well. Sorry, in 2020 we got pregnant in 2022, and she was born in 2023, and we moved like when she was 7 months old.
So that's kind of your thing, Daniel. If you change countries, you gotta switch careers and stretch out the family tree.
Well, the plan was always to go and do my own thing again, but because it was a new industry, new skill set, I thought it's good to work. It's very hard to start a business where you don't have the skill set, you don't know anything about the industry, and you're just like, you have no value to provide, right? So I was an intern at Brains at first. I was literally a part-time.
A genuine, not the Twitter intern that everybody makes fun of, but an actual intern.
I was an actual intern managing I was allowed to tweet occasionally from the Brains account when but it was vetted by a lot of people first. Anyway, yeah, so it was good. It was just, it was amazing. I mean, because of the business skills and stuff that I already had, and I was tweeting so much, the sort of the skill acquisition was pretty fast. So by so I joined them in July 2021. By the beginning of 23, I was pretty much doing all their social content, marketing. Like, me and the chief marketing officer were basically running the entire marketing team. There's a design team that helped out as well, but in terms of like copywriting and content, we're doing most of it.
Amazing.
Yeah. It was awesome.
I guess
it was great. And I was like working remotely.
Yeah. No need to get in a suit, right?
No, I mean, I didn't wear a suit in real estate either. Fortunately, it's too hot in Hong Kong to do that.
And humid.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I was working remotely, making decent money, and I sort of incepted them with like the value of traveling to conferences. And so I got sent to, I did like some ridiculous amount of conferences between the end of 2021 and the end of 2023. I must have gone to like 15 conferences. So I got to travel a lot, got to meet a lot of the people in the Bitcoin space in real life. It was amazing. So if anyone's
Which is very different, right? To speaking to people online. Like people sometimes don't realize the value of going to a conference. Maybe you could share some of that insights.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think online is good for like an initial connection, getting people to know who you are, and maybe you get to know who they are. But for getting to actually know them, the in-person things are like a different level.
Yeah, 100%. So, and then you yet decided to do another leap and kind of end your ties with Brains, of course, on good relations. I know you guys are still in good contact, but then you decided to go fully on your own thing, which is, well, maybe I'll let you tell everyone kind of what you've been doing since, I believe you left Brains in December 2023. Was that correct, right? End of previous year.
Yeah, December 2023 was when I left. I just felt I felt like I was ready to level up on the I was really enjoying writing. Obviously, like, tweeting was going really well. I was like, I've got something here with the Twitter. I've got something with writing. I need to double down on this. I'm not someone that's very good at like side hustling. I would, and I have 2 kids. It's like, I'm not staying in the office till 10 p.m. working on my side hustle and not seeing them. So it was like, got some savings, got some Bitcoin. It's going back up. Let's sell some of this, buy back some time, and let's, say in 6 months to a year, I back myself to have figured out what I'm going to do next. So at first it was like, I'm just going to study writing and write on Twitter, right? Without a goal. And so from that came the sort of first thing that came was that I was going to write a book. I was writing these like crazy historical Bitcoin threads. And so I was going to write a book. And then people started messaging me and commenting like, the threads are so good, and asking me questions about writing threads, sending me their threads for an opinion on them. Then somebody asked me to write threads for them, like basically ghostwrite. At that stage, I was kind of like, I want to write for me, not for other people.
Yeah.
But then when I did the math on books, it's like, you got to sell a lot of books to make a good living. And so then I was like, okay, the ghostwriting things could be an option. So yeah, gave that a shot. But I never the idea of consulting had never like popped into my head for some reason. So around the same time as like starting to offer ghostwriting services, what happened was a lot of people were interested in my ghostwriting offer, but they just wanted to like learn themselves how to write themselves, not necessarily have me ghostwrite for them. And the ghostwriting thing is like a higher ticket thing. Not everyone can afford it, but everyone wants like to know how to do that. So then I was like, okay, there's obviously room here for some consulting as well. So yeah, I basically I started a company here in Dubai, and I do on the sort of like higher end level of services, I do done for you ghostwriting, and then I do consulting for people as well.
Amazing. And that then led you to kind of how our paths crossed with you launching just recently at the beginning of this year with You Are the Monopoly. Essentially, could you call it consulting course or mentorship?
Yeah,
or
it's like a consulting community or a coaching community. Yeah.
And how did what drove you to kind of expand into that than just stick to kind of your primary this ghostwriting service and consultancy that you're already doing for the last 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like the closer you work with someone, the more you have to get along with them and be aligned, and that's a really hard thing. So when you're investing a lot of your time in working closely with someone, it has to be good. And if you're vetting ghostwriting clients based on a vibe, it's hard to pre-vet that. You have to put in the work to work with them first and then figure it out. And I was like, there's a level to how many ghostwriting clients I can take on. So there's essentially a cap on how much money I can make, how much I can work. And then I don't want to necessarily, I want to be able to scale how I sell my time more than a done for you service. So the done for you portion of the work I do is like, I'll take maybe one or two ghostwriting clients. But what I saw with consulting is that you can scale that up way bigger, and you can help a lot more people on a done with you / done do it yourself basis than you can with a done. The only way to scale a ghostwriting agency is to hire ghostwriters and have other people. And I wanted to do the solo consultant thing. I just prefer that. I think it's like, I don't need to be worrying about employees, and if someone quits and higher overheads and whatever else, you can run the consulting business model that I'm doing probably to $1 or $2 million a year if over time, with having no more than 100 or so clients in the group.
Yeah, no, and that was kind of reading. Well, I've been following BTC Gandalf Twitter page for a while, and then that's how I came across at the end of last year when I left my 9-to-5 job and decided, I want to go full time into, dedicating my time and energy to Bitcoin with this podcast, doubling down on the content side. But then I can't really make a living. We have a similar thing. I also have 2 young daughters, and as much as I love podcasting, someone needs to feed the daughters and the wife, right? And myself. So it's like 4 mouths to feed. And I was kind of thinking, how can I add my value and help out more people, and kind of this Bitcoin self-custody, consulting, mentoring, coaching, however people like to pin it, was something that I was very passionate about, that I've been doing for years to family and friends. But I was kind of not knowing, how do I get this started? And then just as you had that one evening in bed on the iPad, I was one evening scrolling through through X, and I came across your announcement in December saying, how to become your own monopoly. And as reading that thread, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. That's like exactly what I'm looking for. And then next thing I know, you have a perfect funnel when you lead through to your landing page, put in your email, and then bam, next morning there was an email sitting in my inbox. And since then, it's been 2 weeks, I believe, by now, that we've been working together, and I joined your school and community. And I would highly encourage anyone listening that kind of has an idea of how they can build their own service, or basically build their own brand. The next question I want to throw to you, Daniel, is about like the importance of building your own brand, and specifically people in the Bitcoin space. I think people are not focusing too much on branding themselves and how they do value. It's more about their thing that they're putting out. But I just wanted to give my own vouching on Daniel's work that he's doing, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. And I believe that with Daniel's help, my mentoring service with Bitcoin self-custody is on the right path. And in the coming months, there's going to be a solid plan and essentially blueprint, which we're going to build together. So
a quick message from our awesome partners at StampSeed. Future you is dependent on you. Don't let them down. Future you is set for life with Bitcoin, but only if you back up your seed phrase properly. No napkins, no phone notes, just StampSeed. Fireproof, waterproof, life-proof. Use BTC Story for 15% off at stampseed.com. Future you just fist bumped you. Don't mess this up. And now, let's get back to the episode.
I'm very fortunate to have a good connection with Daniel. But now back to you with regards to the importance of personal branding, which I think is something super important. And I think the listeners will get value from the importance of focusing on your personal branding.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately people want to do business with other people, not with faceless corporations, right? So it's just a lot easier to differentiate, everyone is so different. Everyone has a different life story. We have some similarities, but also some differences, right? And
yeah,
but not everyone has a business and is using their personal brand to grow their business. So by combining those two things, you become a rare type of business, right? And you attract people that are like you, who want your service, but they are attracted to your service because of you, right? It becomes the differentiator on how do you pick between the millions of marketing consultants, or how do you pick, like, even the beautiful thing about using the personal branding to market your business is that it makes your business different, even though you do the same thing as the next guy. Right? But you do it, you have your own set of values, your own set of opinions, your own set of life experiences. You're a different age, you're a different gender, you're a different nationality. And so you attract a client that, like, is most of the time they have some similarities to you, or like the way you explain things or the values you have, they agree with, right? But you'll find that you will, if you're doing consulting and stuff and you're using your personal brand, you're going to attract a lot of people that are like you, right? And it's much easier to differentiate your business using personal brand than it is to come up with some revolutionary new way to, like, let's say you're a gardener, right? You're going to come up with a revolutionary new way to cut grass? Are you going to, like, undercut the super cheap person, right? There's only so many ways that you can differentiate a commodity business, but there's an easy way to do it, which is putting yourself at the forefront of the brand.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And, I think personal branding is something that people don't usually think about. They focus more on how do I make my brand more unique? How can I, how do I beat my competitors? But actually focusing, especially if it's a smaller scale thing, I think, branding as you yourself, you attract much more, many more leads and many more clients than, say, sponsoring ads or doing like Google advertising and stuff, where you're essentially a nobody in a big pond.
I've seen businesses who've never focused on personal branding see the power of it, and then suddenly say, all right, we're going to take this money that we used to sponsor events, conferences, podcasts, whatever, and we're going to funnel it into this thing. So the other thing about it is that, when you invest money in building a personal brand, or time into building a personal brand, it compounds, right? When you sponsor a conference, nobody remembers who sponsored Bitcoin 2022, right?
Yeah.
But when you're building a following on social media and you're building your brand there, that compounds, like that adds up over time. You don't lose the work you did today on your brand. You don't lose the reputation you built today on your brand, of course, unless you mess something up. But what I mean is, like, it is an ongoing thing if you want to, like, build it, but people don't forget about you like they would forget who sponsored Bitcoin. You have to keep sponsoring Bitcoin 2022 and 23 and 24 and 25. And it's just like Marathon or whoever. And it's like, but you see, for example, Marathon, Fred Thiel is on Twitter. He's active. Like, he tweets, people, he doesn't necessarily share a lot of personal stuff. He's mostly just tweeting about Bitcoin and whatever, but it's better than nothing. It's better than nothing. Yeah.
True. And it doesn't mean by personal branding you have to be talking about your own story. You can still be providing insights and giving other values. People sometimes may think, like, personal branding is just you kind of prompting your own ego and just talking about yourself. But there's so many different avenues that you can take it on. May that be your expertise, may that be the insights, may that be current trends. There's so many ways you can frame it.
You have to do all of them. I think to get the most powerful type of personal branding is you have to do all of them, because if you're just talking about the topic, that's not bad, right? I mean, again, it's better than nothing. It's better to talk. It's better to, and I think people care more about what Fred Thiel has to say about something to do with Bitcoin or mining than what, a Marathon press release or Marathon's Twitter account or whatever. So just by putting a real face and name to it, that's already building a personal brand. But I think, you have to go, if you want to build a connection with people, you have to go some levels above that. And you do have to sort of share some of your opinions, some of your values, because that does essentially connect people to you, right?
Yeah, for sure. So I want to take it back now, spin it to Bitcoin. And, Bitcoin's often, symbolized as this freedom tool. How has Bitcoin and your engagement and kind of going deeper down the rabbit hole influenced your views on just general life, family, and work, so to say, being a Bitcoiner yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I guess when there's something that you want to acquire with your money, or, it reframes the way you spend your time and what you spend your money on. When there's this thing that you believe can massively increase your purchasing power over time, you start to really, the opportunity cost of other consumption increases a lot, right? So you start to think about how you spend money here, there. So that was a big thing for me. I never really, when I was a teenager and a young adult, I became obsessed with Warren Buffett at one point. I wanted to become an investment manager, and I would buy, when I was like 16, I was buying some obscure stocks based on, the first website I would open on my computer every day was Motley Fool. I don't know if you know Motley Fool. It's like a stock. It's basically an excellent info business, but they have some free articles about stocks, and then they get you to sign up to newsletters where they, the different newsletters essentially recommend different stocks, and they, this newsletter is the stock picks, and
it's like stock signals.
But it's like research. So it's like analysts researching companies and recommending you should buy this one, buy that one because of this. They're very successful. I think it's like $500 million business. I think they own Bitcoin too now as well. I think they were like,
well, they should.
They own, I think they bought Bitcoin in like 2021 or something. Anyway, a really cool business, but I used to read that all the time. And so, I was very aware that, like, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. My mom gave that to me when I was like 15 or 16. I was very aware that, just working is not enough. You need to invest your money, or then, go into business or whatever. So, but then later on, as a young adult, I was a bit more just enjoying life, not really caring about saving money. Yeah, exactly. So that definitely, the introduction of Bitcoin definitely played a part, because like suddenly there's this thing that I want more than the hedonism, right? And I think mainly it just, like, with getting into Bitcoin came what I mentioned before, just the opening up to this like subcultures. I say in America because that's really like where, if you're on Twitter, that's where a lot of the personalities are. Yeah, that's where the talk is all centered around the US. I mean, it is for basically everything, but just getting introduced to like this US subcultures, traveling to the US. I'd never gone to the US until 2012. I think it was the first time I went to the US, and then I didn't go back again until like 2018, and then in 2021 was when I really started to travel to the US a lot, and I've been there a bunch now. So just getting introduced to like US culture, which is relevant given that it's like the most powerful, economically important country in the world. It was cool to learn more about the US. It's cool to learn about different, political schools of thought about economics. I didn't know what Austrian economics was before Bitcoin. I didn't know what money. I certainly didn't really understand what money was. I studied a degree called Economics of Money, Banking, and Finance. And I did my dissertation on silver. Yeah, my dissertation was on something to do with how silver would be a great investment because of the industrial use cases versus gold or something like that. I can't remember. I went back to look through it to see if I'd like mentioned Bitcoin at all anywhere, but I hadn't. This was like 2011 as well, so I hadn't. But yeah, I went back to look at the module, the money and banking module I did. Nowhere was it explained what money was.
What money is.
Yeah. You had like how money's
Crazy. And
created,
it's a
like
degree
central
revolving around
banking.
money, right?
Never.
Pretty
So
crazy.
I can't remember what the module covered. It must have been like how money, how money is created through central banking and loans and reserve ratios and all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't at all like nothing to do with what money is, what makes something good money, nothing, which is insane.
Well, I guess that's why the elites and the guys at the upper echelon have been ruling the world for so long, because they made it kind of taboo to be asking what is money. Not even taboo, but like nobody asks about, before Bitcoin, nobody was interested about what is really money, and in schools, let alone in junior and high school, but like even in university degrees, I don't have such a specialized degree as you. I got a bachelor of business management, but in my 3 years at university in London, we never were taught about what is money, and all the finance was just revolved around Keynesian economics. There was no mention of Austrian or any other financial school of thought, which is very kind of how should I put it, unfair, because you get put down this route of, this is the road you go on and there is no other parallels. And then now with Bitcoin, it's like you start questioning, finding out what money is, and then you start questioning everything around you, and then you're like, wow, this thing that was sold to me as kind of as a as a fake, as a Ponzi, like everything else seems to be the Ponzi, and this is the only non-Ponzi about it. And that's why I think it's so hard for people to wrap their heads around it, because Bitcoin really fundamentally makes you rethink a lot of things that you were born and raised and taught, like this is the way it is. The sun comes up in the morning, goes down, the moon comes up, goes down, and that's the way the money revolves. So it's interesting with analogies of Bitcoin and money.
Yeah,
But Bitcoin goes much further.
We've, as a society, like this stage of history, we've been, we haven't had good money for such a long time, basically since the proliferation of education, of information, right? So when we had good money, or let's just say when we had better money, right, there was no, the civilization was highly uneducated. People didn't know how to read, they didn't know how to write. Like this sort of information, even if it existed and some people knew about it, it was very hard to get it in the hands and in the minds of other people, right? And then as we've come into 1800s, 1900s, and there's a few more books and schools start and like mass education starts, that's basically at the same time we've had the start of like fiat money, right?
Yeah.
And so until Bitcoin came along, which isn't that long ago, the information age has been about spreading like money as fiat, not as good money. And only a small corner of the internet and pre-internet, a few gold bugs were the ones that understood what good money was, and that's it. And so with Bitcoin, it's definitely opened that door again for people to study what money is, but it's still a tiny amount of people. It's still super niche. It's still very, very small. More, obviously almost everyone in the world has heard about Bitcoin, but the people who actually understand it is like, God knows of that, 0.1%. There's still a lot of people who own Bitcoin and they just own it because like crypto is something you should own now, right? I know someone who, let's say they're close-ish to me, right, who owns other Bitcoin named coins for the purposes of diversification. Just because like, they own all of them because why not, put a bit of money in this one, that one, just in case that one goes up more or whatever.
Sounds that person needs to study a little bit more the subject to realize in Bitcoin there is no diversification. That quote of never keep all of your eggs in one basket. Like, to me, with Bitcoin, that kind of contradicts that saying. Like, to me personally, I would say most of my eggs in this orange basket, because to me, what's the, like, to me it feels like it's more riskier to diversify than not to. I mean, not to diversify than to diversify, because everything against Bitcoin in the long term, we're not saying next week, next month, but in the long term, everything trends towards zero compared to the Bitcoin's value. So it's kind of, I feel like, to me, it's like the safest thing. Some people may say real estate's the safest thing, but now we've just recently seen the horrors in LA, what happened, like people always said, the Bitcoin, you can never actually, physically keep it, but with real estate, it's always there. No one, it's not going to go anywhere. But then, there's a catastrophe and bam, like your house is a bunch of ash. So with Bitcoin, as long as you have a good self-custody setup, which of course Gigi can help you with that, you don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah, I think the best asset or the safest asset or whatever is subjective, because the person is a variable on that. So someone who doesn't get Bitcoin and has no interest in understanding it, they're not going to put all their money in Bitcoin and hold it for 10 years. So it's not the best asset for them. But they might buy a couple of rental properties, and they kind of get that, they understand the rental property market, and they can rent them out and make a bit of profit and get some capital appreciation. And that's something that they have conviction in, they have an understanding of, and they'll hold that for 10 years and it'll do well for them. Would Bitcoin have done better? Yes. But is it possible that they would have, is that in the realm of possibility that they would buy something they don't understand and hold it for 10 years whilst not understanding it, whilst the price oscillates up, 400% and then down 80%, etc.? No, they're not going to, right? And so, this person I mentioned before, like, they're looking at buying an apartment for investment. Like, they don't have the interest to study to figure out what's better. They're just going with whatever the default. And real estate has that big brand of, like, oh, you buy an apartment, you get rental income and it goes up, and people can understand that they don't get Bitcoin.
I want to bring up a question regarding real estate, since you have plenty of experience in it and spent many years in it. Like, I see real estate as a humongous bubble. People talk about Bitcoin as a bubble. Like, real estate to me, on a base level, it's something, it's not an investment vehicle. It's there to provide essentially shelter for you, right? Like, if we're talking about residential, like personal, not commercial real estate, over the last 30, 40 years, since the boomers started, buying up all the houses and all the flats, like, it's gone astronomical. Most generations today, Generation Z, right? Most of them are priced out of real estate, depending, of course, where you live in the world. But if we're looking at the Western world, let's just call it the first world countries, most Gen Zs, there's no way they can purchase a flat today, let alone a big family house. What's your take on that? Do you think, and first of all, what's the reason behind it? And then the second of all, do you see this bubble popping? Or you think as long as we have fiat currency forever, it's like Bitcoin, one-way trajectory, real estate's always going to be growing in value in fiat terms?
Well, I think as long as you have something that they can sort of make an infinite amount of, and they do keep making an infinite amount of, and it has zero cost because it's just them pushing some numbers on a computer and suddenly there's more money, right? That's less scarce than real estate, and that has a cheaper cost to produce than real estate. Real estate it's not absolutely scarce. You can make more real estate, but it is costly to produce, right?
Yeah.
So it's relatively scarcer than fiat. And so it should continue to go up against fiat forever, right? Especially when you think about the fact that most people are then using mortgages to buy property. So there's ample financing, there's ample capital available that you can borrow from someone else who's willing to lend it to you. Basically, the cheapest interest rates that you can get are on a mortgage to borrow money to buy this real estate because it goes up forever. It's hard. Property developers, they don't have necessarily an incentive to overbuild real estate and oversupply real estate to push the price down for the consumer, because that means they are essentially making less money, and they could get caught in a place where they're selling real estate that, they buy land with a future projection that the houses they're going to build on that land are going to cost X amount, right? And if they themselves are the ones that are overbuilding, then causing the supply of houses to be too high and the market to crash, then they lose money. So they don't necessarily have the incentive there to build lots of excess housing and make housing affordable. I think the only way that, housing does become more affordable is if it loses its place in the hierarchy of, like, where people see it as a great investment, where something like Bitcoin comes in. And I think a lot of people are realizing this, that, like, you could just buy Bitcoin and do nothing, and there's no tenants, there's no burst pipes, there's no, like, they're not paying your rent, there's no, like, your property taxes are going up, there's no hurricanes, there's no fires, whatever. So I think just something has to come along that's better than real estate, and for that idea to proliferate throughout the entire population of the world. But real estate investment is a very strong meme.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. then again, on the terms of, we're talking about like comparing the prices to fiat, like comparing prices to Bitcoin, you know this very well, BTC Gandalf, but like to some listeners, like I urge you, like go Google, like there's these many like infographics about like the price of the average US home, how it's, you know, comparable to how many Bitcoins it took like 8 years ago. Like an average house in the US costs somewhere around like $300,000. And you needed like 300 plus Bitcoin, like 330, 340 Bitcoin to buy that house. And then 4 years later in 2020, you know, that house increased to, you know, somewhere over like 400,000, 420,000. You already needed like 20 something Bitcoin. And then, you know, 2 years ago, well, no, not 2 years ago, last year, 1 year ago, in 2024, that same house is in fiat terms valued at over $500,000. But in Bitcoin terms, it's essentially, it's like less than, you know, around 5 Bitcoin. So like it keeps going down and down and down. So, you know, I'm also in that place. I was thinking, we recently moved last year, and, you know, kind of the wife was like, oh, like, let's get our property, you know, we've got like the kids and everything. But I'm in this position where it's like, I don't know, like I would rather wait it out for a longer period of time and then like sell less of my stack, if that makes sense, to get something that we really want than just to get something now just to have it. But then like it depreciates in the unit of account that I live my life. I'm in the minority. Like I measure everything in sats, from like the dinners that we do.
Everything does.
True.
And you have to spend money. But I'm not saying you should buy a house now. It certainly makes sense to wait until you can, you know, if you're going to buying a house is, you know, a long term, more permanent than choosing a place to rent for a year, right? And so if you think like, this is a kind of place where it's only going to be good for us for a couple of years, or, you know, 5 years, probably not great to buy it. Probably better to wait until you can get the places. Like I could see myself living here for 10, 15, 20 years. And, you know, for me, I would only buy real estate again if it was basically, it's like, I don't want to bother with moving, and I want to set up my house the way I want and maybe do some renovations so I can have this kind of kitchen, or like have my office in a certain way and hang up a picture and I'll have to take it down in a year and move again. It would be for that reason. I would just treat it basically as an expense, not as an investment. I would never view it as like, but it's better to hold Bitcoin. Yeah, I think that's always going to be the case. And I found that working with people who are buying their homes, they get stuck between like, this is the home I want, but this other home is maybe a better investment. And it's like, well, you have to decide, are you buying it for investment, or are you buying primarily to live in? If you're buying primarily to live in, you're going to have to make the trade-off that it might not be as great an investment as some other property that you don't want to live in, right? Yeah. But you have to decide. And people want to have their cake and eat it too. They're like, they want to have the house they want, and they want it to be a great investment and whatever else. So just if it fulfills one function, that's already like you're winning.
Decisions. Daniel, now that you're based in Dubai, you've been there for some time. How's the Bitcoin scene there? Because I hear there's a lot of Bitcoiners in town, and even like outside of Bitcoin, there's a lot of crypto stuff. But more specifically on Bitcoin, how's it been to you? Like, is the community really that real as people say it is, or it's just more, you know, the socials saying how great it is for Bitcoiners in Dubai?
I mean, I think anywhere that doesn't have capital gains is great for Bitcoin. So,
or a travel rule.
From that basis, it's great. But yeah, there's a strong contingent of Bitcoiners here. Obviously, again, the whole like low tax thing aligns with a lot of the type of values that Bitcoiners have, and also just going to where you're treated best. Like life in Dubai is amazing. So there's not like an overbearing government that's like, you know, messing things up. Like the sort of the rulers here have done an amazing job with the city. Like it's crazy to think, if you look at Dubai had no electricity or water in the 60s, right? It's basically gone through the change that took like, you know, the West from like the 1800s to the 2000s.
Hundreds
it's
of
done
years.
That, yeah, like 200 years of progress in like 50 years. And then people are like, Dubai has no culture and Dubai has no this and that. And it's like, it was literally a desert with like a couple of huts not that long ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great place to live. Like my family's very happy. There's Bitcoiners here. So if you want to hang out with like-minded people, you can. There's about 100 people in our Telegram, in like our Bitcoin Telegram chat. So there's a Bitcoin meetup every month. You've got Bitcoin MENA, the conference happening now. Rumors that UAE is buying Bitcoin. I don't know if you can, I haven't tried to look at places where you can spend Bitcoin or try to go to places to spend Bitcoin. I just kind of like I live my life. If somebody takes Bitcoin, I'll give it to them. If not, then
Doesn't
it's
matter.
fine. Yeah, more
More
Bitcoin
sats
for
in the
me. I
vault.
mean,
It's
yeah,
fine.
exactly.
True, true. So, but in the long term, do you see yourself like living in Dubai for like a long time, or like, I mean, long time meaning like settling down and investing into your own property and like being there for the next decade and beyond, or you're still unsure and open to options?
No, we're pretty sure that we're going to stay here long term. The only place I would
Okay.
leave here for is to go back to Hong Kong potentially, but I still think Dubai is a better place for families. I think if you had
Hmm.
infinite money, maybe Hong Kong. Like, there's obviously the Thai that it's essentially the place I consider home. My friends are there, so if you had infinite money, maybe Hong Kong could be just as good as Dubai. But there's just way more space here. Real estate's way cheaper. It's safe. It's very family friendly. The weather is incredible for like 6 months out of the year. It's easy to travel to Europe. It's easy to travel to Hong Kong. So it's business friendly. We have a good life here.
No.
We're happy. The plan is to settle. In a few months, I'll be trying to get my golden visa. So that's like a 10-year residency.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
yeah, I see you thoroughly love Dubai and have been happily advocating for it. So yeah, anyone listening who wants to visit Dubai, as Daniel said, there is a vibrant scene, and I think there's going to be
no,
more and
don't
more
move
of it
to.
because
Don't come to Dubai. Don't. It's awful. Don't come here. We don't want any. Real estate's going up. It's becoming too expensive. Don't move here.
no, but I think you laid out some great points and some values which align with Bitcoiners, because Bitcoiners, when it comes to taxes especially, it's kind of like this sensitive pain point topic, and I think the UAE in general has a nice sweet spot compared to Europe. What's happening with 40, 50, 60% taxes that people are paying? You're essentially working half of the year for the government, which is
You have
insane.
You have a business. You have a bit. I think about it this way. Imagine that you are you're a sole trader. Your ability to generate income. Think about it like a business, and that you have somebody coming in who is saying, "Give me half of your business, and in return, I'm going to give you these things." Right? I'm going to police and maybe public healthcare, and we're going to take care of the roads and whatever. But when you want to go to the you have a back issue, you want to go to the doctor, sorry, you have to wait 2 years. I know I'm taking half your money, but you have to wait 2 years before you can get back surgery because it's not urgent. Or like, oh, that pothole on the street that's like ruined 17 of your tires and you have had to get 3 rims replaced. Yeah, it's not going to get fixed ever. It's like, that rubbish that we used to collect for you once a week, now we're going to collect it once a month and we're going to charge you more for the same 4 times less collection. Like, I don't think the problem is with taxes. The problem is that people don't feel like they're getting a fair deal in a lot of places, right? And so here, there are some, you do pay the government some fees for stuff. There is a corporate tax. You're paying 5% on VAT on everything you buy, but people feel like they're getting a fair deal here, right?
Yeah.
They're whatever the thing is. Happy Hong Kong doesn't have zero tax, but it has very low tax. And again, you feel like you're getting a fair deal there. I just don't think paying 50% of your income and getting back what you get in return in a lot of the European countries is a fair deal.
Yeah, 100%. It sounds like racketeering. It's like, give us half of everything you make and then we'll see what happens to you. Maybe yes, maybe no. But do you think, Daniel, in your opinion, like, is more specifically on Europe, do you think like Europe is approaching this breaking point where people are just sick of what's happening with like living standards going through the roof, taxation going through the roof, regulation going through the roof now, especially with this MiCA regulation that came in, this whole travel rule, and you declaring all the crypto payments that you're doing, Bitcoin or non-Bitcoin. It's getting out of hand. And like, do you see this breaking point coming soon, or you think it's just gonna carry on in this downward slope for a long time? What's your gut saying?
It depends what you mean by a breaking point.
I mean, like, for breaking point, like, I mean, like, for the system to shift in the sense of Europe, like for the union to come to an end, like for countries to basically detach and become their own countries as they used to be before Europe. Do you see that coming in the near future?
I'm not that familiar with like the politics of the EU. I know that's like with, there's Brexit and that. So that's already like the EU is already not what it used to be, right? So could I see other countries doing the same thing? Potentially. I think a lot of the core countries are very like pro EU. But yeah, if things, I think this is the kind of thing that like, it's like boiling frogs, but then suddenly the water boils over, the frogs get out, they're jumping around everywhere, and then like all hell breaks loose. So I think it could take, look how much changed just because of the pandemic, when people had a little bit of time to, like my story of having the time to study Bitcoin. Lots of people had the time to think about their lives. What do they want to do with them? That like pandemic, so many people sort of like quit jobs, started businesses, like they made huge life changes, right? And I
Or
think
migrated to the other side of the world.
yeah, or left. Yeah, so you could see something similar happen if there was some sort of economic event or another pandemic or something that just like pushes people over the brink and just changes, just changes reality very quickly all of a sudden. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, they're gonna print until, I think what happens is that they're just gonna, all these countries are just gonna keep spending money,
Print to infinity.
Print to infinity, and also try and confiscate more of your wealth through taxation, through exit taxes. They're going to try and claw on for as long as they can until until a candidate comes and says, we're going to get rid of all of that. And the people are so fed up that everyone votes for that person. And we'll see how that person finances it. They'll, because they'll have to basically bankrupt the country. But if they really want to stop printing and whatever, it's going to take some like negative event, but it will probably be better than the negative event of printing to infinity, having hyperinflation and all of that.
So what the European countries need is a European version of Millet to come in with a chainsaw and just
I think it's already happening,
put some order in. It is.
I just from the little I know, I think everything seems to be moving to the more far right.
Yeah. Well, let's see. It's going to be an interesting year ahead. We're only getting started with 2025. I think there's a lot of surprises up the sleeve. So let's see what happens. But to round it up, as I do with all guests, Daniel, what's some advice, or it can just be one advice, that you would give to people that are only just yet starting out their Bitcoin journeys? What's one piece of advice you would want to leave them with?
People who are just starting out their Bitcoin journeys, study it and make sure you understand it really well. If you want to buy and hold Bitcoin for the long term, I think conviction is the number one thing. So yeah, and you build conviction by having a very solid understanding and confidence that you understand the thing really well, and that the price going up and the price going down, and Trump starting an SBR or not starting an SBR doesn't become a factor in you changing your mind. There would have to be some very, very deeply fundamental change in Bitcoin for you to reassess. So I think that takes very strong conviction and a very strong understanding, and probably keeping up with what's going on to some extent without letting the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year news make you sell.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Essentially building future diamond hands instead of lettuce hands. Like don't be buying at 100K and then it dips to 70K and you're selling because you're like, oh, Bitcoin's going to die. I think buying Bitcoin and not looking at the price is one of the best advice, and the other point that you mentioned with, fundamental events, now we have the orange man, Mr. Trump, entering the office in a few days, and everybody's betting on this super pump that's going to come with the strategic Bitcoin reserve. What if it doesn't? Like, what if it's all a play? Because at the end of the day, politicians, they play a game themselves. They say things to get the votes. Is it going to happen? Is it not? We will have to wait and see. One thing's clear, Bitcoin doesn't care if there is a Bitcoin strategic reserve in the US or anywhere else in the world. Like, it didn't care for anything else. Bitcoin, it's on its own trajectory. Bitcoin, to some listeners that are only starting their journey, like, Bitcoin is not just the new money. It's a new form. It's a time chain, right? Like, it lives in its own little realm, and it's us to adapt to it, not it adapting to us. So yeah, I think you gave some fantastic advice, Daniel. Just start learning, acquiring, holding, and not being sidetracked by all the noise that's happening out there and some degen traders on X that people like to follow. Perfect. Any other?
You'll get shiny object syndrome of like, oh, but Solana's going up more, or like, oh, maybe I should get some of this Pepe or whatever the hell else happens in bull markets where you read about people making X on some shitcoin, but those things ultimately end up going to zero eventually. So the nice thing about Bitcoin is you just have to learn the thing about the thing once, and then you can spend the rest of the time like being a productive member of society, do something where you make a great income, and you don't have to be like day trading or become an investor in order to like, make money. Just that's the
True.
nice thing about Bitcoin. You just put your money there and get to work and keep making money, keep putting it in there, and spend time with your family.
True. And keep building your monopoly, right?
Yeah.
So where can we send, Daniel, our listeners to follow you online, get in touch? I presume it's X, but anywhere else you wanna send the listeners to?
Yeah, I mean, my Twitter at BTC Gandalf is sort of the place where you can find out about everything else that I do. If you want to sign up to my email list, it's yourbtcstory.com, but that's where I mainly talk about the consulting, business, personal branding side of things. I do tend to get a bit more personal on the email list. Yeah, that's the place to go if you want to know more about that. And that just X is where I do most of my content production, tweeting, thoughts, what's going on with my life, and all of that.
Amazing. Well, we'll have everything in the show notes. We'll have your X handle. We'll have the newsletter sign up. And yeah, once again, Daniel, thanks so much for everything you're doing. Thanks so much for taking the scarce time to come on the pod and share your story, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I hope all the listeners did too. And I wish you all the greatest luck and prosperity in the new year of 2025 to you and your family. And I hope to have you back on the show in the future as the Bitcoin stories progress.
Anytime, man. Thanks for having me, and likewise.
Thank you for tuning in. If this episode resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who might benefit too. Your support keeps us going, and we appreciate it. See you in the next one.